Today we have with us Vaishna Biswas AIR-367 UPSC 2025 Kolkata topper. Vaishna, how's the feeling like?
Ma'am, it's a feeling of deep gratitude. The initial feeling of excitement and ecstasy has somewhat settled in, and now it's a more peaceful, calm feeling. I'm looking forward eagerly to my career as a bureaucrat, and that changes your life in a way that you learn to be more responsible, you learn to be more mindful, so that you can exhibit those officer-like qualities for the future generation. Even before joining training, I'm trying to inculcate those practices gradually in my life. That is how life is going on.
Okay. Vaishna, tell me something. How did the civil services happen to you? What was the time, when you thought that, you want a career in civil services, whether it was at your school level or your college level or even after that?
So, the desire to be a part of the civil services was somehow in my mind from a very early age. My maternal grandfather was in the West Bengal civil service and later worked as an IAS as well. So his legacy made me see that dream, and since 5-6 years of age, whenever someone asked me what do you want to become when you grow up, I would say I want to be a civil servant, although at that time I didn't even know what it really means. However, as a serious career option, I considered it much later at a more mature age. It was after my 4th year of college that I looked at my future career options, and at that time I on one hand had applied abroad for masters, and on the other hand I had a work offer at TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. So somewhat like a sudden moment of realization, it came to me that I want to give the civil services a very serious wholehearted try. And for that, the work opportunity at TRAI seemed to be a very smooth transition period. That is how I decided to slowly start my preparation as well.
Okay. So what was your work experience at TRAI like, because the other day you were telling that, you started preparing while you were working and then you took a switch when you felt that no, full-time preparation is very essential. So how was the work like, and if it was very good, how were you able to leave it at that point?
Ma'am, the work at TRAI was deeply enriching, and since I was an electronics and telecommunication engineering graduate, so working on telecom policy was a huge opportunity to both contribute through my technical knowledge and also learn how policy making works at the national level, because ultimately it is TRAI's recommendations which the Department of Telecom mostly accepts in the telecom policies. So it was very interesting, very prestigious also, very responsible, because one policy could affect millions of Indian subscribers. So the work was of such a nature that I never could bring myself to compromise my work even a little bit for the sake of preparation. It was a very high stakes work, and whenever I also tried to balance it with my studies, either of the two was getting hampered. So for 1.5 years, 1 year, 8 months to be precise, I tried to juggle both, and it just did not work, because I am a kind of a person who is usually more comfortable with giving the full attention and full energy to one single task. So how did I manage to leave such a good and such a prestigious job? So I would say that my work seniors were very instrumental in that. Because while I was enjoying my work, they told me that if your ambition is the civil services, then you have a bigger dream. And to live a bigger dream, you sometimes have to take difficult steps. And even as your colleagues, we would tell you that you should focus on your preparation, do it full time if you think that is important, and go ahead, we are giving you all our wishes and all our support. So that was a big positive move which helped me take this difficult step of deciding to prepare full time.
Okay. Vaishna, since both your parents are teachers and renowned teachers of Bengal, so how it was like, you never felt like, professing a career in teaching, since you have teachers, you have seen them, right from the childhood, you never felt that, teaching should be something which I should go for?
Of course, ma'am, their influence did change my life, but I would say in a slightly different way. I was at the receiving end of that teaching more than wanting to teach myself. My mother was an active part of my lesson since childhood to the UPSC preparation stage. My father was also involved with my STEM subjects. I would say that as a career option, although my grandfather's influence was more, and actually he had wanted my mother to become a civil servant, but since she found more interest in academia and she was so passionate about literature, she chose a different path, and somehow that dream continued and it came to me. So I just chose a different path, and I got a lot of support from my parents also for that. That is why it worked out in this way.
Okay. Vaishna, academically you have been very strong throughout, right from childhood. As your father rightly remarked the other day, that I never stood, first, and Vaishna never stood second. So what do you have to say about it? Was there any pressure from their end, or you were like, you have to do it for them? It was in you. So what is it like?
Ma'am, whenever there was pressure, it was mostly internal. It came from within me rather than from them. They were always there with support, with whatever facilities I needed, with mental, emotional, financial, all kinds of support. But they never imposed their expectations on me, and they never made me feel like I have to earn their respect or their love by doing something or by proving myself. So it was more of an encouragement. They were ready to support me in whatever way, but they were never pressurizing, or they never put any negative pressure on me, so to say.
Okay. So coming to your preparation part, so how you were even talking about your hobbies, that you had enough time to practice your hobbies also. How did you do that? Hobbies as well as preparing for civil services, even working at TRI. So how could you manage all of that together? What was the driving force?
And when I started preparing initially with my job, so at that time I could not follow such a balanced lifestyle. Initially I gave up on almost everything, including my hobbies, my social life, friendship, and I tried to just juggle between my work and my studies. But mentally that did not work out well for me, and there was a period of intense sadness and loneliness. So ultimately when I started preparing full time, I tried to maintain a more healthy lifestyle and a healthy routine. 8 to 10 hours of study was definitely mandatory, but in between we do take breaks of half an hour or 40 minutes. So during that time I used to pursue some hobby, to practice music, or to make some short sketch, or to write a short piece of poetry, whatever came to me in that moment. And on the Sunday evenings, if I had fulfilled all my targets that week, I would take an evening off to watch a film or go out with my friends. So this is how I tried to balance out my preparation with other aspects of my life.
Okay. You just spoke about friendships. So as today's youngsters, they are more into this, that we need to cut off from friends if we are doing something. So what do you have to say about that? Did you cut off from all your friends, or you had some few friends whom you were in regular touch with?
Ma'am, friendships are, I would say, crucial to survive in this journey, because it's not just about studying. Your physical, mental, all kinds of facilities, all kinds of capabilities are going to be tested. So to survive the low days, to rise up from setbacks, we do need positive friends who love us unconditionally. So I did have a few friends both within the UPSC community and outside. Within UPSC community also, friends are very important because they understand the exact struggles you are going through in terms of preparation. They are on the same boat as you. So the kind of way you can share with them and realize that your problems are also reflected in theirs, that is a very liberating feeling. And even outside UPSC, when you just need some refreshment, when you need to see life outside of this preparation, there also friends from childhood, from school, from college, them just being there to express their faith in you. That just saying, when they say that we know you are going through a very difficult period, a very uncertain period, but we have seen you, we have faith in you. So that keeps you going. So definitely there might be some friends who don't turn out to be true friends and who give you more negativity. So isolating from them is probably a good option, but definitely not from the genuine friends who lift you up and motivate you.
So that was helpful for you?
Yes, ma'am, that was.
To lift you up?
Yes.
Okay. Vaishna, both your parents have been very much an integral part of your journey as parents, as teachers. So when you were working at TRI, and what were the challenges which you have to face, because since throughout you have been with your parents, your studies and college, everything in Bengal, this was the first instance when you had to be away with them, and that too working in a, profile like TRI. So what was the challenge like?
Definitely, ma'am, it was a very difficult transition for me because I simply was not used to living so far away from my parents. Firstly, going to a different city, adapting to that lifestyle. Secondly, the meeting the expectations of a very high stakes job. And thirdly, staying away from parents and not having that immediate support that could have been there had I been in their company. And fourthly, again, pursuing a very hectic preparation with that. So that is something I simply could not find a positive balance in. Somehow life lost its harmony, so to say. Because all these things together, 4 new challenges, balancing all of them, juggling all of them, and staying happy and healthy at the same time, it all could not simply be done together. And that is why after a point of time, whatever period of work I did ultimately, last few months I simply decided to focus on my work rather than preparation, and I decided that I will ultimately resign, prepare full time, and I will come back to my hometown when I do take that decision, so that I can have that comfort, that support. So that is why I took this decision as well.
Okay. So when you came back and you started your preparation again, so definitely that the sense of comfort, the harmony which you are talking about, that must have come back, right? With their presence, because the other day they were telling, that, she was facing difficulty in economics and all, they used to read out to you, and your mom, she is the university topper in sociology, which is your optional, right? So that must have been significant, right? The difference which they must have added. So how do you see that, that companionship in terms of, talking to you as well as helping you in your assignments? So how do you see that?
Ma'am, that was a huge blessing and a great transforming point in my preparation, because firstly, just being near them, being near your parents during this difficult period, during this very arduous period, is something that gives you a lot of positive energy. Secondly, the academic support. So as you rightly mentioned, ma'am, my mother was a university topper in sociology, so she actively was involved in my sociology preparation. Sometimes when I did not have the time, she used to watch lectures on my behalf, she used to make the notes, she used to help me with model answers, and with essay paper also she helped a lot. My father also, he took a lot of enthusiasm in discussing current affairs with me. So there's a pond near our house, we used to go for an evening walk around the pond and we used to discuss that day's current affairs. So that kind of an enjoyable journey is something that was possible only because I was in their vicinity, in their proximity. So throughout, ma'am, from the beginning stage to the last stage of interview, in fact 1 week before the interview, I gave 2 mock interviews only with my parents as the panelists. So that kind of a support was only possible because I was near them, and again, I'm very grateful to have had that.
Okay, very fortunate enough, to have that, teachers and mentors at home. So now tell me, as we mentioned about sociology, was your mom the reason to choose sociology as an option, or it was your decision?
Ma'am, it was a combination of factors actually. Firstly, although I was an engineering student, in our first semester of college, sociology was introduced as a subject. So that created an early interest in me. Secondly, one of my best friends from school, she also pursued sociology in her graduation, and she participated in some workshops and she started some online lectures. So I started watching those, and again my interest was further fueled. And third reason, of course, was my mother's background and expertise in the subject. I knew that she could actively help me with it. And fourthly, of course, the nature of the subject itself. It is a very interesting, very relatable subject, knowing the society around you, knowing the theories that shape the processes of society. So all these reasons together made this choice for me.
Okay. Now Vaishna, we would like to come to this part, since this was your first mains and first interview. So we congratulate you once again on that, It's not easy to do it in, one shot. So tell me specifically about your, main strategy, what it was like after your prelims. How did you, gather all about it, and what was there after appearance of prelims? What it was like, that I'll be able to make it, or you waited for your result? What it was like?
Ma'am, just the day after prelims, or the same day when I did appear for prelims, so I had initially thought I would not check the answer key and start preparing for mains nonetheless, but curiosity got the better of me anyway, and I did end up checking. So however, that was a positive move for me, because I was scoring more than the cutoff, and that gave me a push that no matter what, I have to start preparing for mains now. So with a break of about 2 days, I started full-fledged mains preparation. I made a schedule for myself as to by what time I want to complete which subjects, 2 weeks for GS1, 2 weeks for ethics and so on, and optional alongside. So I would say that making this schedule and this timely targets, that is the first step and a very important step, because otherwise we end up studying in a very haphazard manner, one day one subject, another day another subject. So I tried to follow my plan. Whenever I accumulated any backlogs, I tried to put in extra effort to get myself back on track. Every day, apart from revising my notes, apart from making some value addition, I also tried to write some PYQs on a daily basis, so that the writing practice remains. Towards the end, ma'am, I also tried to give 3-hour mock tests, and I got them evaluated to learn from their whatever feedback I was getting. That is how, ma'am, those few months are the most crucial period. Mains exam is the dictating factor in your rank, being 1750 marks heavy. So those 3 months are the most crucial perhaps in the life of a UPSC aspirant. Having cleared prelims, that is your golden opportunity, so making use of that efficiently is very important.
Okay, so after your prelims, like when you are preparing for your mains, how many hours you used to study on a daily basis?
Initially, when I just picked up after my prelims, it took some time to get back to that pace, because before prelims I was, just the week before prelims I had studied even 15-16 hours. So again the pace became a little slow after that, so I started from 8, then I raised it to 9, then gradually my average was, I would say, 10 to 11 hours, but there were again higher number of hours, on some days 13-14 hours also became the norm, maybe 2 weeks before the mains, but average I would say it was about 10.5 to 11 hours, ma'am.
Okay, and this is including your optional, right?
Yes.
Your sociology.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any specific preparation you took, like, because see, you are from engineering background, and as we say that, they are not into writing in comparison to an art student. So how did you face this here? Did you practice more, or it was like that you knew it from day one that, I can write, or did you put in extra effort?
Ma'am, writing, or specifically speaking, creative writing was something which came naturally to me. In school also, I was always praised for my essays, for my poetry. So writing as such was not very difficult, but definitely writing UPSC answers is a different ball game, because it's not about just writing but condensing content into a limited time, into a limited space. So that requires rigorous practice, and what I faced the most challenging was actually conveying that content in a concise manner in that limitation of time and space. I always, initially at least, I always ended up writing very cramped answers, was not able to finish in time. So that required a lot of practice, ma'am, definitely, and mostly I practiced with PYQs only. So at the initial stage of my preparation, I started answer writing through current affairs based questions, because when your subjects are not complete, it's difficult to write actual GS or optional answers. But on the basis of editorials, some question if there is posted on some channel or anything, I would try to write the answer to that. After a few months, I started writing full-fledged GS and optional answers, and every time I wrote a mass number of answers in bulk, I would get that evaluated by some teacher. So that is how I built my foundation in answer writing.
Okay. So since you fetched good number of marks in your prelims, and you have done quite well in your mains also, So what do you have to say to the students who are watching you? The role of current affairs I want to highlight, because they are very confused as to read from which paper, to follow magazines, or to follow those, annual compilations. So what was your strategy? How were you deep into current affairs? And for the, this timeline of 2 years, how did you read, your reading habit?
Ma'am, regarding current affairs, I would say it's something I slowly developed, because honestly speaking, I was not a very regular follower of news before my preparation. So first I just started the habit of reading newspaper, simply reading like a story rather than trying to deeply analyze it, and also watching some news analysis videos on YouTube. So that's just made my foundation and broke the ice for me regarding current affairs. And gradually it becomes a habit, and again it becomes like a story only, which you keep following, you become interested in it. So not just as an academic subject, but also as a subject of interest in the world, something is happening. So that was one part that I just started growing that interest. Second was to approach current affairs from an examination perspective. So that again was something I really struggled with, because current affairs seems very vast and endless. Every day there is new information, how to process. So what I did was, ultimately I continued the habit of reading newspapers every day, so that I was in touch. If there was any good example or any good statistic I came across, I collected that. But before prelims, I did follow one annual compilation. Whichever you feel suitable, the student can select that. Choose any one source, revise that at least 3 times. Then you will be comfortably able to answer most of the questions that at least are required to clear the cutoff. And for mains, I used current affairs for value addition, for enrichment. In certain papers like GS3, for GS2 international relations, all the subjects more or less require some enrichment using current affairs. So for that again, there are magazines. If you are following some test series, their model answers will also include those current affairs. So I sprinkled in my answers the current affairs of that year in some way or the other, ma'am.
Okay, that means you were cool with this current affairs thing, because the point is that students panic when it comes to the current affairs part. And we have to understand the fact that prelims, if you have to clear, you have to be good at your static portions, right? Because your polity, history, economics, the portions, if you are not good at static, current affairs is not going to help you, right? So that is something I think you can advise them, not to panic and stick to one resource, which she rightly said, that one resource, and just revising that would help you. Even if you miss out 2 to 3 questions, that is not a big issue, but your foundation has to be strong. Okay. Now, since you even told me that, ma'am, before I started preparing for civil services, even I, used to watch those, videos, interview videos on, YouTube, and, that was something there in my mind that, I have to reach there. So now, after having cleared this examination, how do you see that, students are, visualizing that, and, how do we end up getting on that side of the chair? So how do you see this, Are we, going to reach that level without our prelims and mains? And what is the first thing which you need to, capitalize on? Whether it is the personality test or your, foundation, your mains and prelims. Please convey.
Yes, ma'am. I was also among those aspirants, because the first content which I came across when I decided to start preparing was the mock interviews. So since it is not possible to see videos of toppers studying 10-12 hours for prelims or mains, which they have obviously done, we first get introduced to the mock test videos or mock interview videos. So while I understand that looking at them, students have a feeling of excitement that we have to reach the interview, we will appear before the panelists. Definitely it's a very prestigious stage to actually be able to interact with the UPSC panel. But it is also important to be realistic and to remember that firstly in the rank determination, it is mains which carries the whole bulk of the marks, and secondly, without clearing mains you cannot even be eligible for the interview. So the first step which a student should follow is to familiarize themselves with the syllabus of both prelims and mains, and in fact first one should start preparing for mains itself, because learning the subjects in detail in a subjective manner, that is what prepares your basics, it gives you conceptual clarity. Then gradually you can start developing your MCQ aptitude also. So if you don't know the core tenets of the subjects, then interview is a long way away. So please start with the foundation and just being thorough with the subject first.
Okay. And we agree with the fact, right? Until and unless you have good content, you will not be able to deliver in the personality test, right? So that content has to come, and it would take time. It would take time. You need to study, you need to just study the book, the materials, and then reach to that level, because oratory skills you will not help unless and until you have good content. So
Yes.
now, since you know, as you have prepared from the city, from our very own city, Kolkata, so what do you have to say to students who are having this, you know, that a place is more important, more than a place, what you feel is more important? Tell me, whether the place of study is more important, or your good conduct, your discipline, and the people around you matters more.
Yes, ma'am. There is again a conception in students' minds that preparing from a certain hub is the only option, or without that it is difficult to clear the exam. But there are so many examples year after year of students clearing it from their hometown by studying at home. I myself have studied from Kolkata during my full-time preparation phase. So it is a lot more easy to prepare from your own hometown. In Kolkata, I had the comfort of my home, I had the support of my parents, there were good resources also available. And now with good institutes like Kavish coming up in Kolkata, one can go for offline classes also if one wants that personal interaction with the mentor, with the teacher. So it is the cost benefit ratio, I would say, is much higher in that case, rather than moving to a new city, looking for an apartment, new facilities, everything. So if you have that option to study from your home, it is the best possible option. And Kolkata also now is becoming a very potential destination for studying for civil services now.
Okay. We have a lot of students, Vaishna, coming, and you know, since they have appeared for examinations like NEET and you know, for medical, and if they don't end up clearing them, you know, they have that, you know, fear in mind that, you know, what if UPSC doesn't happen, you know. And you told me about your episode at TRI, you know, you left a well-established job, you know, you even had that risk, you know, if you don't end up making in UPSC. So how we can help those students who have that fear that, you know, that we will not take risks? Because UPSC is all about taking risks. So how do you see that? What message you have to give to them?
Ma'am, I would say that when you take this decision of preparing for the examination, you should be well informed about the stakes involved, because it is an exam which does require taking risk, and the risk is high, but the rewards are also extremely high. So if you manage to take that risk, and if you manage to utilize the time, the potential that you are getting, that you are affording yourself by taking the risk, and you reach there, then you will look back and thank yourself for taking that difficult decision. So, and again I would say that UPSC exam is something that is actually like a full-time job itself. You cannot balance it with, there are definitely individuals who prepare for other exams alongside UPSC also, those other exams also. But in my personal opinion, this is an exam which requires a full time, a full energy, a full dedication. So if this is your priority, then I would say that give that importance to it, and make it, and like conduct yourself in such a manner that you make that risk worth it. That is my personal advice.
Okay. Now tell me something about this, you know, the students coming up with this, ma'am, anxiety, depression, and you know, we are into this and that, you know, getting diverted at point of time, and you know, then coming back, and you know, how do we manage all that? Because since you even told me that, you know, you even have those episodes of, you know, when you had that fear in mind, even right before your interview also, as you were telling that, you know, practicing mocks with your parents. So how did you deal with that? Obviously, role of parents is important, but personally, what did you do to manage it?
Yes, ma'am. So this is a very important issue to discuss, because this examination is a very long and time-consuming process. Preparing for it becomes a part of life, becomes one's whole life actually during that period. So mental health is very crucial, and staying calm, staying positive actually increases your chances of clearing the exam quite a lot. So firstly, when we feel anxious, So we have to look for the source of that anxiety, where it is coming from. So in my case, these periods of anxiety used to come mostly when my preparation is not going on the right lines. When I feel that I'm not able to finish some subject, I'm struggling a lot with some topic. So it is by rectifying that, or rectifying our approach by talking with our mentors or some seniors, that we can again get back to a structured path that tells us that we are doing the right thing, we are going the right way. And secondly, I would say that there is a phrase I heard, that action cures anxiety. So if you are actually living your life in a disciplined way, if you are trying to fulfill your targets, you're working hard, then automatically anxiety will subside. Anxiety comes when you know you're not doing the right thing. So that is one issue. Second is the feelings of depression, isolation, loneliness. So as I mentioned previously also, I think it is a bit of a myth that you have to cut yourself off entirely or completely give up on your social life to prepare for this examination. Balance is always possible. Even after studying 8 to 10 hours a week, you can, as I said, you can take your Sunday evening off, you can reconnect with your family, your friends. So give yourself that space and reward yourself give yourself small rewards from time to time if you are following your targets and if you are doing your studies sincerely. That will help you to make this a journey rather than a destination. Like UPSC essay itself says that life is better to be seen as a journey rather than a destination. So make the journey count, make it enjoyable. That is how one ultimately lives through this process and looks back at it also with a fondness and with a smile.
Definitely. Now Vaishna, you have an exceptional score in your interview, 210 out of 275. And you were the one who said, ma'am, after mains that, what it would be like, how the results would turn. So this definitely helped you, boost your, final ranking. So what did you do special? What it was about after your mains, getting back to this and, recollecting all the facts, information, current affairs. So journey from mains to interview.
Immediately after mains, actually, I was not very satisfied with my mains performance. So I actually had assumed that I will not probably clear mains. So at that time, before the mains result came out, I was preparing mains only again. So at that time, I was just preparing my optional, whatever subjects I felt I was weak at. But when the results came out, it was a very pleasant surprise that I had ended up clearing mains. So from that stage, I decided that now interview is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I will give that my 100% and leave no stone unturned. So I tried to follow again a very structured and disciplined process. Interview preparation is a bit of, it's a very personal journey for every individual because you have to prepare things which are unique to you. So firstly, I prepared my DAF. I filled my DAF carefully. I included hobbies and achievements which I felt could lead to interesting conversations. Secondly, I prepared every topic as thoroughly as possible, like my home state, that is West Bengal, my work experience at TRI, my electronics engineering, my hobbies of poetry and music, my achievements like the scholarships I had gotten. Every keyword I took, and on that I made very exhaustive notes in the form of question answer. So I heavily looked at the transcripts also of the actual interviews. There also I got a clue of what kind of questions are asked. So I followed that, I made notes, and I made a habit of daily speaking out those notes. Whenever I am preparing some notes, I will speak it out in a question answer format so that I know that I can reproduce that if it actually, that question gets asked to me. Second thing I did, ma'am, was to have a peer group of 6 friends, and we took our interview, like each other's interview every day. So that kept us disciplined, and it was like a test that you have to keep studying so that you do well in that test. So getting a good feedback from friends, I would say, is perhaps a bigger achievement than getting it from a mock interview, because friends are more brutally honest. So that was there. Third thing, ma'am, was again current affairs. During interview, it becomes even more crucial because you not only have to answer MCQ or a subjective answer based on current affairs, but actually speak on it. So I again made detailed notes of every day's newspaper, spoke that out, analyzed it in a way that I discussed about it with my friends so that we could get diverse viewpoints. This was a process I continued till my actual interview, and also the mock interviews I gave during the preparation. The one at Kavish in particular was the quality of questions was excellent. So the mock interviews also helped me a lot with the potential questions that could be asked from my DAF. I tried to incorporate the feedback from the mocks, and I just took the interview stage very seriously. I mean, of course it can happen that that particular day can go badly, but it is not a matter of luck, it is a matter of sheer hard work even for the interview. So if you do get through mains, then do take this stage also very seriously, because in my case only, despite not having done exceedingly well in the mains, I kind of compensated through the interview marks. So that can definitely happen, I would say.
Okay. So the day, the final day when, results were supposed to be announced, and, what was the feeling like from morning? How did you feel, and, whether I'll make it or not? Did you have your parents around you waiting, or they were, at their workplace, you were waiting, and, who saw that list first?
Ma'am, the 3 to 4 days before the final results was a very anxious period, because there was a lot of speculation every day. It was a thing in the air that results will be out today, checking the website every 5 minutes, not being able to do anything else. So that was a very difficult period. I tried to, however, gradually channel my energy into something positive. My mother brought me a very beautiful book called Classic Works by Women Writers. So I was reading works by Emily Dickinson, Charlotte Bronte, and spending my time in that, trying to divert my attention through that. And the final day on which results did come, I was actually alone at that time, because both my parents were at work. And it so happened that during both my prelims and mains, the result was first seen by some of my friends. So they told me about the fact that I had cleared before I myself saw. But in this case, I wanted to be the person to see it first. So I did that process, that very harrowing experience of downloading the PDF and doing that Control F, and finally finding my name in that, which was a huge relief. So it was me myself who went through that process.
And then immediately after that, you called whom, mom or dad?
Ma'am, I first called mom. I think I did not get her at that time. She was in a class. So then I called my father. And then both of them rang me up, and we did a conference call, and we were very happy and grateful. And that moment is something you always remember.
Lastly, Vaishna, I want to ask you, I want you to convey to the students, and especially students from Bengal who will be watching you, that what is the ideal time to start civils preparation, since you started it at a later time, when you were towards the end of your graduation. So what are the benefits of starting the preparation at an early stage, and how it can help them better their graduation results also? And if you are aspiring for civil services even after 12th, so don't you think humanities is a better option to choose if you have an orientation for civils? So yeah, 2 questions.
And firstly, regarding when to start, of course it is most advisable to start alongside your graduation itself. Of course, one small advice, that do not let the graduation performance be affected because of it, because a good score in graduation is also important for future careers. But you can definitely start building a foundation from your first year itself. There are again institutes coming up to help you with that in Kolkata, as I mentioned about Kavish. So just making yourself familiar with the subjects, because if you start early, that struggle of knowing how to study, of just knowing the basics of the subject, that will be much easier after your graduation when you are finally eligible. So at that stage, you will be at a process of consolidating your material, of actually writing tests and all. Because in my case, since I started after graduation itself, so that process of just knowing the subjects, of knowing how to study, what resources, that process itself took a lot of months. So why just waste that time? Use it in advance. And second is regarding whether humanities is a better option. There is actually a divided opinion about this, because on one hand, it's definitely true that it already gives you the foundation of those subjects that do come in the exam. It makes you more familiar with answer writing, subjective answers. But again, somehow engineering students have a good track record of clearing this exam. More than 50% are engineering students. So I am not really sure what advice to give in that regard. If you feel comfortable with humanities and if you feel that it's going to give you an edge, so definitely go with that. There are many of my students from humanities background, from subjects like political science, subjects like economics, who have cleared this exam. My batchmates this year are there. So both ways it is possible, and ultimately I think this should be a personal choice.
Okay. And what do you have to say, since you have made it, as we rightly say, the Kolkata topper, the pride of Bengal, what do you have to say to the girls specifically, that, and yeah, even about the, there are students coming from vernacular backgrounds, since you have had a, totally English background throughout. So what do you have to say them, that, obviously they would take some more time, but they should not give up on that dream, right? So especially to the girls, what message you have?
Yes, ma'am. So to the girls, I would say that you have much more potential than perhaps the world is letting you believe. So please don't let any external negativity, any external societal box that is trying to put you or confine you inside it, don't let that define your limits. If you put yourself out there, if you believe in yourself, then there is no limit to what you can accomplish. And we do need women in the administration, we do need representation. It is extremely important for a holistic type of nation building. So I would wholeheartedly encourage future generations of women to come forward and to aspire for the civil services. I would encourage their family also to support them in this regard. There are recent very encouraging trends of women toppers in the UPSC, which is very positive, very heartening to see. And ma'am, for vernacular background students, definitely there is a bit more of effort which has to be done, because resources are not always available. The basic medium, the newspapers, everything mostly is in English. But again, there are gradually resources coming up, translated documents. Even AI now is so advanced with regard to translation that I think that can be an equalizing factor. So some things, of course, you have to familiarize yourself with. Little bit of, if you do not even use English as a medium, use it as a language for communicating, for knowing some basic terms. So by that also, even with your vernacular basics, there are excellent examples. I can remember Manoj Kumar Sharma sir, well popularized by 12th fail, and he had rightly said that it is not important whether the glass is made of steel or it is made of glass, it is the water, the purity of the water inside it that matters. So if you have those officer-like qualities, I have full belief that with vernacular background also, you can excel.
Okay. So this was all about Vaishna. She has given a lot of advice to students, how she herself practiced it, the role of her parents, mentors, teachers, and she was fortunate enough to have, them all throughout this journey. So we wish Vaishna all the best in all her future endeavors, and thank you.